Pretty depressed today.
Why are we watching? What's his name? What's his name for Friends?
Can I thank for taking
Chandler Bong? That's Chandler.
Look, it's the prince. Is he the prince?
Chandler Bong.
Is he okay? Who did that? Discover! Hey, it's not real, man. It's like, are you sad? Please do not do this to me right now. Whoa.
Go ahead and turn in your work.
Are y'all
Hey,
playing our
are
game?
y'all coming to our match?
Let it go. I'm not even play today. They don't even have a whole team. It gives me a hug. Freaky.
Are y'all still playing with us?
My boy. Stop. Don't touch it. Shut up. I'm killed today. Where is it? In the office. But I had to get rid of. I don't know. He did. Well, that's close when he got called out.
Okay, so amidst the depression in here, let me make it clear. I want you to stay on
There's
the
a makeout section in front of the door.
Who?
Hannah Dean and her mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
This is a great video
That's just
today.
what happened.
And this is why we love Bacon County.
What are these?
I think Taylor wrote them. They were on my desk.
For who? For you?
I don't know.
She loves you.
You're not appropriately depressed for the class we're about to have.
You-
That's from
You're
Sayla.
gonna love watching the
That's from
video of what
Sayla.
Marley just said
That's
to
from
me.
Sayla to whoever sits at that
Yeah,
desk.
that's
So
me.
you.
You're gonna love what Marley just said in the video.
You can't post it.
You can't post it.
You gotta cut out.
You're
this
gonna
first
have
part.
to cut that part out. She didn't say a bad word, but she said something that was really funny.
Y'all as depressed as I am.
Turn it off.
This class is about to be so boring. We're about to just do notes.
We're currently depressed, like Chandler Bong. And
God, I'm like him. That's me.
I hate my life. I'm kidding, guys. I love my life.
Live, laugh, love.
Live, laugh, love, so. It's game day. What's up?
Wait. Hit him with the. Hit him with the. He's probably going back there. His class is
Heck no. Heck no. Dude, you're literally so
That's me. You're out there with my next piece.
Bro, Tyler Thomas with the freaking Junior Business.
Oh, it's so depressing.
What all are you turning in?
Look at the chair as an example.
Stop! Don't make Charlie Brown sad.
You never send me
I'm so depressed that someone broke my staples.
Hey, this would probably like 40 minutes early. Make sure there was nobody in the room.
It'll be nice to end. It'll be nice to end.
We drove this far and we had to go a whole different way.
Oh no, I'm so depressed. I tore my paper.
How much was this? More than you want to admit.
$10.
More than you want to admit.
It's not in order.
I like this.
Hey, I just want everyone to know I'm selling pink juice as well for $4. So if you want a cup of pink juice,
That is not the same
want a
thing.
cup of pink juice, I'll sell it to you.
Not the same thing. Completely different.
Alright, let's finish these turn-ins here.
Is this the order you wanted in? We forgot to sign in.
What a depressing way to start a class.
No, I got
Yeah. I'm gonna see how good you
What?
It was either one of y'all game or JD.
Go to our game. We're gonna win though. Ours is our team.
Alright, come on, one more minute for these turn-ins.
What girls are not that good. I'm gonna take first in the name. I'm not gonna let one y'all beat with that.
Right here. You don't matter.
They beat two first.
Alright, thumbs up, belly up, down, Christy, Sheen, Garrett, thumbs up.
I should be a first name.
Oh, thank you. Wait, wow. I was ready to get you. Is she get jealous?
Oh my
Swans, I'm at the crowd.
Yeah,
Does it make sense?
I'm at the crowd.
Oh, now it makes sense. Swanson's not depressed.
Yeah, y'all creepy for that. Everybody all at once go. Oh, now it makes sense. Swanson's not depressed. We're talking about the Great Depression. But I hope that, per the usual, it's weird enough in here that you won't forget it. So, I genuinely am depressed that we got to push forward. We got to push forward with like a regular class day on Friday. We got paddle hard. It's the amount of content we got going on. I would love to kind of round it out with something that's not just notes, but it's where we're at. Okay, rolling into spring break kind of is what it is. So I need you to be here for me. Tuck in one more time. Got this class on the Great Depression and the New Deal that we got to get through. Okay. The notes in front of you, a little bit. They're more fill in the blank, and it is the open-ended vocab. So you'll be looking for the words on the screen. I have highlighted most of them in red. I say most of them in red. So for the most part, you can just kind of be looking at the screen for those key words. Obviously, I'm going to elaborate like I always do. What do you see on the left-hand side of your paper?
Blue square.
Blue square. Take it all the way to the bottom. What is it? It's an arrow. So that blue arrow, which does extend to the back side as well, it indicates time. So we're going to be walking through certain years, and there will be indicators also on the screen. I want you to jot to the left-hand side in that blue arrow. I want you to jot the year that we're talking about as we're talking about it. So you'll see as we go. You'll see as we go what I mean when we're talking about particular years. So where did we leave off yesterday? What was our national attitude?
The roaring 20s.
The roaring 20s. And you can't say that without also going, rawr. Roaring 20s, right? Times were good. Yeah, cringy. It's cringy, but it works. Times were good, right? Times were good in the 20s. People thought times would never be bad again. Coming off of the war, yay for us, shared national identity, world power, money is good, family is good, economy is good. Times will never be bad again, right? Wrong. Thank you, one of you, for knowing that it was wrong, because it leads us to what we're going to have is the stock market crash. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not an economist. I'm not a super expert on all the monies that changed hands. I'm trying to explain it from a history and impact perspective. So if you want to talk to me about the price of tea in China and how it affected the stock market, I can't get there for you, but I'm trying to just tell you what happened and what those lasting impacts were. So here you see that first arrow right by the stock market crash, put 1929 inside the blue. That's the year we're talking about. So it's like we made it through almost the whole decade, the 20s, and then we have this negative event, the stock market crash. So here's kind of what happened. Prices were inflated based off of what is known as stock market speculation. Basically, people were buying on what is known as margin, or you guys might know it as credit. Credit cards. If you buy something with a credit card and you don't have that money right now, you're buying, basically like these guys were buying stocks. They thought that they could buy a stock, and then by the time they needed to pay for it, their stock would have turned enough of a profit that they could pay for it with that profits. Okay, that's the simplest explanation I can give. They were buying something with money they didn't have. So if there's a lot of that happening, eventually a lot of product has been purchased that people don't have money to pay for, and this is going to lead to a problem, a deficit, which is going to be the crash. So investors were gambling on stocks to increase in order to turn a quick profit. They were buying it with money that they didn't have in the first place. Yeah, go ahead and take a seat. I don't worry about it. I want you to take these notes. So a little bit more on that related to the stock market crash. Stocks sold real fast, spins out of control. I know this is language that's on your notes. Two notable days. We got a Black Thursday and a Black Tuesday. Both of them October of 1929. And there are 2 days where behavior in the stock market was frantic. Behavior was not rational. Prices started to go down, so people got scared and they start to sell and oversell. If the market, and this is where I'm kind of borderline explaining economy stuff, if people had behaved with patience, this might not have happened. But try to tell human nature to slow its roll, it's probably not going to happen. People are always going to behave a little bit erratically when their personal fortune is on the line. So prices went down, people started to sell and oversell. 2 big days, Black Thursday, Black Tuesday,
Black Friday.
Billions. Well, that's not related at all,
Yes,
actually. Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving when people spend a lot of money for different reasons. In this regard, okay, this Thursday and this Tuesday, not Friday, billions of dollars were lost in one day. It was catastrophic. It kicked off the Great Depression. The Great Depression lasts a decade. So roaring 20s, yay for the good times, let them roll. And then because of this one event, largely because of this one event, another a decade of depression is kicked off instead. Now, deep history, and you want to like really get into reading a whole bunch more primary sources and this, that, and the other happened. This isn't the singular event that led the country to depression, but in terms of the history I'm teaching you, this is the big breaking point that leads the country to depression. So if you're going to watch the History Channel at midnight and you're going to see a documentary about the stock market, you might hear some additional information, but we want to about what led the country to depression. But we want to focus on the Great Depression. Yeah.
Drop something.
Is that the third time in this class? I think that's legitimately the third time in this class. At least it had a lid on. It did have a lid on. It did have a lid on. All right, my bad. Don't let me distract us. Stock market crash leads to the Great Depression, and if you haven't yet please write that word, or please write 1929. End of the roaring 20s, RAR, 1929, the stock market crash is going to lead to the Great Depression. So we're going to see a variety of bank failures. And as you walk down your notes, you got a section for bank failures, right? 1930, 1931, right? We're walking ourselves through the decade here. So what does it mean for a bank to fail? What do you think it means for a bank to fail?
Ain't no money.
Ain't no money left. That's true. That's a pretty fair definition. See, what's different from this time period, the 1920s, and today, is that at this time period, there was no insurance on banks. And with no insurance on the money in the bank, that means when the bank was empty, it had to close. So amidst the stock market crashing, many people were concerned about their personal fortune. You might say your life savings, you might use the word nest egg. People were worried about their income that was saved in the bank. See, here's a little trick about banks that you might not realize. The bank never has its whole value in the building at that time. Now, these days, credit cards and digital and all that kind of stuff, you may understand that there's not cash in the building, but a bank is actually using your money that you put into it. Let's say you put in small numbers here. Let's say you put in $1,000. Well, the bank may immediately use 500 of those dollars to go invest elsewhere. I mean, now take it to large numbers. Let's say someone's putting in $1 million and the bank is using $500,000 to invest. Well, if everybody in a panic like this wants their money back in cash immediately, does the bank have that money?
Nope.
Bank literally doesn't have that much money.
Could they do
in
that
it.
today?
Huh?
They do it a day of a panic, like this happened again and everyone went to go get their money. Could they theoretically give everyone their money back?
So let's stick with the 20s, and then I'm going to tell you about today. Because of this, there are measures in place that wouldn't let this happen today. So, but at the time, there was no insurance on the banks. The banks did not have all the cash in the building at the time. So with lines around the corner, I'm going to click these words off so you can see. People are lined up at this bank to take all their money out. And from, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Collins, Mr. Brown, Mr. Green, like all these families want all their money out immediately. Well, guess what? At a certain point, the bank ran out of money. And if you were next in line, you didn't get your money. If you were 3 back in line, you didn't get your money. If you were still all the way down the block, you didn't get your money. This leads to banks literally closing. Now, today, this doesn't happen because of insurance that's in place, and we're going to talk about how that came about to be. So, no insurance against banks closing means thousands of banks did close, and this is called a run on a bank. Okay, so I say lining up around the street, this is called a run on the bank, people wanting their money back at the same time. Well, in the end, people lost their life savings, but this can't happen today based off of a New Deal program that we're going to talk about. New Deal's at the top of your notes. We're going to talk about the New Deal. So same thing with the dates here. Make sure you got 1930, 1931, just, a step lower because it was kind of a period of bank closings. It wasn't on that Black Thursday, right? It wasn't one day event. It was a period of time where banks were regularly closing. A run on a bank would lead to the bank closing. A couple of pictures from this time period. Pictures being taken in black and white, but some of them are colorized. I think you kind of bring the picture out a little bit more. This is October 29th, 1929. That is that Black Tuesday. And this gentleman, well, just looking at him, what type of a person would you say he is? Wealthy. Okay. What job do you think he might have had? Businessman, or specifically, he was a stockbroker. Okay, I know the history of this picture. He's a stockbroker. And what he is saying now is that he sold cash nice automobile for $100 cash, right? He is more interested in $100 cash than owning the vehicle. Now, I don't know exactly the price of the vehicle just for inflation, but it would have been worth more than $100. Point is, he's so cash poor, he's willing to trade his possessions on the spot for just a little bit of cash. People went from super wealthy, and you can see his attire, you can see that he woke up that morning probably in a good position financially. But with the crash on that Tuesday, Black Tuesday, he lost it all, and now he'd rather have $100 cash than any of his material possessions. This was a common scene in the streets of New York City on that day because a lot of people lost their money in a flash, in an instant. Next picture here, this is called the poor man's store. We might call it a thrift store today, something to that effect, but these are the type of stores that popped up in and around the country at this time, as if to say, this is a place where goods can be found cheap. You can sell your old materials, be it clothing, appliances, whatever. So poor man's store. It's like they weren't even trying to hide it. We're all broke, and if you're broke, come to the poor man's store. Next picture here just kind of highlights bad clothes. What does it look like the kids are wearing? Can you tell?
Overalls.
Overalls, I think I heard it over here. Yeah, potato sacks, burlap sacks. Her skirt, you can see the printing on it. I don't know if it would be flour or potatoes, but like literally just a burlap sack. The type of item, if you buy a bag of potatoes and it comes in a sack, well, she didn't also have money to buy clothes, so she just simply used the burlap sack. This is the level of poverty that people started living in this time period. We're going from the roaring 20s, life is good, flapper dresses, music, culture, etc., to now we're in a season of poverty, big poverty. Picture here, what is this child doing? Children. Not stealing. I can see what you might be thinking, but what's begging is right. Children are beggars. So children were sent into the streets to try to tug at the heartstrings of anybody who had an extra nickel, and these children are begging for food and change just to get them through the day. So series of pictures here just trying to kind of show you how much poverty the country was in. Poverty leads to protests. Sometimes there were organized protests. This child is holding a sign that says what? Can't you give my dad a job? Many people were willing to work, and there just weren't jobs to be had. Employers didn't have money to pay them. Even though people were willing to work, the job just wasn't there. So this is a bit of a call out to Congress and the president. Hey, we're struggling. My dad wants a job. Why won't you make a job for him? And we're going to talk about job creation here in a second. G? Ooh, why can't they just print more money? All right, well, if everybody has $1 million, then what's $1 million worth?
Nothing.
Yeah, if everybody's a millionaire, then who's a millionaire?
Nobody.
You ask a good question. A lot of times that the joke would be like, that's just monopoly money, right? If you're just going to print more money, then what's the money worth? If you're going to print, if a dollar can buy this, a dollar can buy an apple because there's only so many dollars in the world. Okay, an apple is worth $1. But if we print $1 billion more dollars, paper money, and put it into circulation, it makes every dollar less valuable.
Yeah, print the money they
To
need.
support- That's what I'm saying. All the
Like,
people
so they
who
want
work
to
hard
start
and just print that amount.
Wait.
Paper.
How did they?
Oh, right on cue. Right, actually,
I believe
a
in you.
bad cue because you're going to miss the rest of the conversation.
How did
I'm
they
not
just
losing you yet. Let me
lose the
listen to Hagen.
money? Where did this money go?
So they were buying things with money they literally never had. Right?
What do you mean
now
the
you're
stock market
trending,
just
you're
crashed?
trending towards
doesn't make
the class,
sense.
the economy type
Like,
stuff.
just in one day?
Yeah, who's the he, right? Who makes this money in the first place? I get it. I agree. It can be complex and confusing. Who's the big guy in the sky? Hey, who we beating? Savannah, right? Beat him. Beat him. That's a long drive to come back with the L. So come back with the L. There we go.
Like, where did it?
You guys ask good questions.
Where did it
The
go?
entire idea of the stock market.
They're not supposed to.
Soccer players, just the girls.
Just the girls. Thanks, Abby.
Can't leave until 1:30.
You guys have some big questions. I'll be just straight honest and say I'm not the economist who can answer that. I'm not a stock market expert. But a way that wealth is generated in our country is through investment, is through a stock market. And basically people bought, think of it as everybody used a credit card. And then everybody's credit card went bonk. And all the debt that got built up in the, everybody racking up a debt of thousands of dollars via credit. Well, who's gonna pay it back when that money doesn't exist in the first place?
It does exist. They literally print it out every day as money just. How does their credit card just go
All
bonk?
right, it's a vexing question. Let me try to prepare to have this conversation better in the future. Okay, hear me on this. I'm not the stock market expert. I'm not. I might need to consult with Mr. McKenzie to try to explain it better. But I can say this much. You honor kids down.
They did like stimulus checks or whatever.
Yeah, they just, no,
Precisely.
because the world's in debt, but literally they're paying people for doing nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm glad you're gonna run for Congress someday and figure out how to fix it. Because my generation
I
can't.
would vote for it.
We're about to take the bathroom break. All right, hey,
How many friends?
hey, I hear your confusing questions. Garrett, thank you for opening. I mean that. Thank you for opening the conversation. At the same time, we can't bog down with how the stock market works. That's not where we're at. What I can give you is that the stock market crashed, people lost their wealth, people had a run on the bank and lost their whole, life savings. And because of that, the country has fewer jobs and was in poverty. All right, we got to leave it there. I owe you an explanation on the stock market a little bit better, best I can, right? Hey, you know what? Name 3 AC/DC songs right now, or Get Out.
Back in Black.
Highway to Hell. That's one.
I only know.
I got a picture here. Jobless men keep going. A lot of people move from town to town. Hobo culture was a thing. Guys just catching a ride on a train, going to the next town looking for a job. Well, this town's Chamber of Commerce, like we have a Chamber of Commerce in Alma, right? This town's Chamber of Commerce put up a sign that says, jobless men just keep going. Don't even stop here. We don't have jobs for you. So you can see that, from town to town. It wasn't just like you go to the next town and find a job. There weren't jobs to be had. Political cartoon here. So think about this. What is a squirrel known for doing?
Eating the
Eating nuts. What is a squirrel known to do for the winter time? Saving up nuts. Yeah, okay. So we have a squirrel at the center of our cartoon here. He says, but why didn't you save some money for the future when times were good? And the victim of the bank failure says what?
I did.
Says, I did. I did save my money. I did all the right things. That's what's difficult about the situation. You're told to save. You're told to plan for retirement. You're told to trust the banks. People did save their money and lost their entire fortune. So that's a difficult piece of it, is that it wasn't like people were spending irresponsibly. They saved their money. They trusted the banks. They got burned. Leads to a depression. Just like the music I had playing when you walked in. One more picture here. Now, this is humorous. Please do not take this seriously. But this guy is humorously considering suicide. He says, wanting to urgently, a strong rope to hang myself. Alternatively, I will accept unfurnished accommodation for my wife, unborn child, and myself. He's saying, it is so bad out here that it may just be better to be dead. It's a joke. Okay, do not take that seriously. He's trying to point out how difficult the situation is. I am sure that he's kidding because of the second half of the sign. The second half of the sign. But it highlights how hopeless many people felt in the Great Depression. All right, you guys are still stuck on how does money even get printed. Just hear me on this. People lost their money, people lost their fortunes, and it led to a depression.
Where did it go?
This is a picture of people lined up for a very different reason. So look at the picture, read the sign. What are they waiting for?
coffee and donuts.
Free.
Free. Ah, okay. You know who provided this free coffee and donuts?
Somebody had to pay for
The
it.
government.
You ready for it?
The rich people.
Al Capone.
What is that?
How do we know Al Capone?
He was on the video.
He was the mobster who made his money as a bootlegger during Prohibition. So a lot of times, wealthy lawbreakers, i.e. criminals, took on this Robin Hood personality, rob from the rich, give to the poor. And so now think about it. The government and the banks, right, that's the system, they lost your money. Al Capone, on the other hand, he's offering free coffee, donuts, and support. Who are you going to be more loyal to? A lot of people, especially in major cities, had a greater loyalty to the lawbreakers who provided for their needs than the government who could not. So here's a little interesting side extra. There's this kind of whole culture of new heroes. That's right. I wish we had more time to talk about Bonnie and Clyde. We don't. But there is, just like I mentioned Al Capone, I could also mention Bonnie and Clyde. What were they known for taking on? What were they known for robbing? Banks. What did people hate? Banks, because the banks lost all their money. So these bank robbers kind of become new heroes for stealing from the banks. Now
They're robbing it.
they're not to be admired in realistically, right? They shouldn't really be admired, but they were glamorized at the time. Okay, they're the bad guys, and a lot of these criminals did have murder to their name as well. So don't admire them. But in the time period, they were glamorized a little bit. Some of them, even in the day before tweeting and Instagram and all that, TikTok famous, some of them courted the publicity. And these two in particular kind of became known as a he and she dynamic duo, lovers, star-crossed lovers, whatever. They kind of courted the publicity, caught the public's eye. I will say that this is, I think, the fourth time I've now mentioned it. That TV show called Timeless has an episode with Bonnie and Clyde, and it's kind of interesting that they go back in time and they hang out with Bonnie and Clyde. So more than just Abraham Lincoln, like we saw in class, the characters also hang out with Bonnie and Clyde. So just kind of an interesting side extra, where the bad guys take on this personality of actually being the heroes during this time period. That, I don't often say this, that is flat out not a part of your standards and not on your exam. It's just interesting. All right, leads us to 1932. 1932, we have ourselves a new president. There's no date on that one. Just move on down to Hoover, 1932. Hoover is a Republican. Hoover is a Republican. That's a really weird way for that. Come on. He's a Republican. He's in office during this bad time. So very often, the party that's in office as times gets tough gets blamed for what? Everything that's going on. Yeah. So a lot of times, the Republican Party is associated with the Great Depression and with the conditions that led to the Great Depression. Well, as president, he is largely seen as a do-nothing president. He's opposed to direct relief efforts. He kind of goes back to that laissez-faire, hands-off. He does sign a protectionist tariff. That's on your notes. A tariff is a tax on the goods coming into the country, but it only worsens the depression. Not to get too complicated, but it basically hiked up the prices on all goods. We have a tariff on foreign goods. Well, guess what? Other countries slap a tariff on American goods. So in the end, it's just this vicious cycle of extra taxes, and the goods don't get cheaper. It doesn't help American growers. All the goods have a price increase at a time that nobody can really handle a price increase. He opposes other direct federal relief efforts. So he's not advocating in Congress for help packages. He's not advocating for more job programs. He's not advocating for stimulus checks. He is a hands-off. His idea is that the economy is going to take care of itself eventually. Economists, here's the lasting impression of Herbert Hoover. Economists see him as a failure. They think that his tariff was ineffective for sure, and he did not do enough to try to help the country otherwise. So final verdict, economists see him as a failure. Not surprisingly, he does not win re-election, and in 1932, we have a new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So Roosevelt, right, famous name, popular, strong president. Kind of, we slide over Hoover into the more impactful president of Roosevelt. So make sure you got your 1932 written right at this time. The election of 1932 is Hoover versus Roosevelt. Roosevelt comes out on top. Now, what's that? Just hang on. Before we, don't overthink the dates. I'm sorry if you are, as you guys regularly do. Just at whatever slide we're on, when it says the date, that's the right place to put that date, okay? And not every chunk is going to have a date associated with it. But we are sliding on down the timeline, just giving you a general impression of how much time is passing. Before we walk away from Hoover, we got to talk about one significant piece of his legacy, and that is what's known as Hoovervilles. Yes. So this is a picture of a Hooverville, and what do you see? Trash. Describe it in your own words.
It's gray.
Describe it in your own words.
It looks
A
dirty.
sad
Dirty?
town.
Who lives there?
Poor people.
Four people. The word homeless comes to mind, but basically they kind of created their own.
They're not
homes.
homeless. They have
Yeah,
houses.
okay, I got it. They have a
Shelter
home,
over there.
but shanty town. That's probably the right way to put it. Let's take a closer look at what some of these houses actually look like. So these guys have a sign to say Hoover's Poor Farm.
How would you name
Hard times are still hoovering over us. See the play
That's
on
terrible.
words there?
That's awful.
Oh my
Why-
gosh, them kids are
Why do
hilarious.
you think they're using the president's name in?
Because they want them to pay. Because they don't want to blame
I think I
themselves, so
heard
they're
it
going to
from
blame
several people.
somebody
Yeah,
else.
to get his attention.
What they write on the signs, how they write.
What did they write?
How do they write it?
With their
With
blood.
ink? Yeah, with their
Their
blood.
blood, they got. Yeah, because they have money to buy ink.
I don't have all the
Because
answers.
the money
That's
went
what
away,
I'm
you know?
saying.
Yeah, I thought the money disappeared.
They were able to cobble together at least obviously they made these signs. They painted these signs.
Make it out of rocks.
You're telling me they spent money on signs instead of things they actually needed.
Yeah, they went to Dollar General craft aisle and spent $9.99.
That's not written with a rock.
It could be.
Paint and
That's
particle
what
boards, probably what that is. You guys asked some real specific questions. Anyway, hoovering over. Some of you said it to get his attention, right? It's a derogatory term, but it caught fire, much like. Have you ever heard of Obamacare? Is that a positive or a negative way to talk about healthcare? Yeah, it's a negative nickname given by the Republicans to President Obama's. Now I'm bringing it into the current, like
You
always.
mean it's not actually called Obamacare?
No, it's not actually called Obamacare. It's called the Affordable Health Care Act.
It's called Obamacare.
It's called the
No,
Affordable
it's
Health Care Act.
Obamacare.
But as labeled as Obamacare, it's derogatory because it's poking at Obama's health care plan.
Yeah.
It's been repealed. It's been repealed and replaced, sort of. Anyway, just point out that a lot of times, this is not the only time a president's name has been used in a semi-derogatory way. A couple more pictures here. So you can see, do you know where this is? Look to the background.
New York City.
It's New York City. So what is this then?
This is the Bronx.
Where is the largest patch of grass in New York City? This is Central Park. Central Park is 1932. Now these days Central Park is very well developed. It's got nice trails, all that kind of stuff. But this is Central Park in 1932. Now take a closer look at the buildings. What do they look like?
Ratchet.
They look
Ratchet,
like
yeah.
Like it's huge.
Yeah, like so literally it's one sheet and one piece of sheet metal and one piece of particle board and a rope. These are not houses. That's why I'll say that they're homeless. Okay, these are not homes. These are shantyvilles just cobbled together. Here's a really good picture
It's a home if you make it one.
of it's a home.
Home is where the
That's
park
good, Marlon.
I agree with you.
It's literally so. This looks like picture frame. That's a mattress. That's an old door.
And it's their home.
This actually has a nice little.
Are you hating on their house?
Tiny home living's a thing these days.
It's a home if you make it.
All right, so that's Hoovervilles. Okay, just kind of an important term. Here is a big statistic for you. All right, got a lot of chatter. Some of you are like, oh my God, it's too loud. Come back to me. Come back to me. In the Great Depression, unemployment reached a peak of 25%. Look at this. So 1929,
They were still.
before the crash, okay, that's average unemployment. 4%, that's average unemployment. The year after the crash, darn near doubled, tripled, quadrupled, reaches a peak of 25%.
That's WD-40.
Reaches a peak. What if it fell right now?
I'm laughing.
Unemployment reaches a peak of 25%. Guys, that's astronomical. That is huge. 25% of adults who are looking for a job cannot be placed in a job. These days, high unemployment is considered like 6%. 25% of the adult population that wanted a job could not find a job. That's a big deal. Haven serious.
Okay, hold on. Don't talk while I'm talking right now, okay? Listen. So, there's no jobs, correct? Because the employers don't have money to pay them.
That's right.
But if they're selling things, then they're getting money.
Just not enough.
So why can't they pay them
That's why they
at
print
least
more
a little
money
bit? Exactly, like they're making money. These people own businesses, they're getting money.
The same idea. The same idea as why lumber is so expensive right now, right?
Because we're running out of trees.
No, that's not it. My father-in-law is in timber. We're not running out of trees. I assure you
Yes,
that.
we are, but we keep cutting them down.
I thought they was going.
Wait, no, why is, okay, then tell me why is timber whatever.
I would rather like preach the most complex theological sermon ever imagined right now than try to explain the Son of God.
No, tell me about the limber.
All right, guess what? Happy days are here to come again. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Delano Roosevelt is elected in 1932, right? I already told you about that election. He beats Hoover. He's a Democrat. His previous life, he's the governor of New York State, so he's got a political background to him. During World War I, he was a Secretary of the Navy, Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So he's got a government background in his life. He is most notably not a Republican, right? The Republicans were in no way going to win re-election. Hoover messed that one up for them, right? Whether you should blame Hoover or not, he is a Republican during hard times. The country was looking for a party change. That means the Democrat, Franklin Roosevelt, is the best choice, right? The Democratic candidate is going to be the best choice. His campaign motto is that happy days are here again. So a big contrast from the Depression era to, guess what? I'm going to help happy days come back again. He is going to be a leader through 8 more years of depression, okay? So it's not happy days are here immediately, but the point is he's giving hope. He's giving hope to people. President Obama is going to run on a similar motto in 2008. He's going to run on hope and change. Sometimes people just need hope, and that's what Franklin Roosevelt brought. Now, if you know anything about Franklin Roosevelt, look at the picture there. What do you see? What's he sitting in?
A wheelchair.
Wait a second. Our president was crippled.
It was crippled.
Good job. So you guys clearly have some background. He was afflicted with polio. He actually has a retreat in Georgia. What town is it? Somebody help me. Little White House in Georgia. Cedar Springs. That's right. Yeah. So he would very often come and relax in Georgia, and that's because of the hot springs in the area. Basically, it was good for his body. It was good for his health. But here's something that's truly remarkable. How would the United States look on the world stage if the president was in a wheelchair? Opinion-based, but how would the United States look?
Weak.
The idea would be that the United States look weak. Now, we've come a long way. People with handicaps are not seen in the same fashion as
What do
they
you
were back
mean?
then.
All of our presidents
But
are old
hear me.
anyway.
If the world saw pictures of Roosevelt in a wheelchair, that would make people feel like the United States was weak. So, hey, that crowd, stop. But I'm going to tell you, we've had the best classes when y'all get checked out and then the whole class gets quieter. So please, don't make me feel like that. Stop chatting. Like, what's our new rule? Don't be a distraction, right? That dull roar that I feel like I have to yell over, I just can't handle it. Jency's like making eye contact, begging to be able to hear my voice. Briley's back there taking good notes. And then it's just like, there's like a din, just a buzz right there. Stop. Thank you. If the president was seen in a wheelchair in an international situation, photography, video cameras, all that kind of stuff, the United States would be seen as weak. So here's something that happened that would never happen today. The media, what you got?
They didn't take many pictures.
That's right. The media knew about his ailment and didn't take pictures, didn't publish pictures of him in a wheelchair. That's pretty cool. Because instead, these days, the media likes to attack the president, bring him down. Good, bad, or indifferent, right? The media attacking the president may keep him accountable, but it also just kind of like makes us feel like we're griping at each other. It's amazing that the media decided, whether you like the president or not, they decided to not publish pictures of him in his wheelchair. Pretty significant, and it kept the world from knowing that he had an illness, which is going to be pretty significant when the world goes to war again. Roosevelt does something that's precedent-setting. Talk about George Washington setting precedents, right? When he does something. Good morning. Good afternoon. Come on in, Miss Williams. We're making a connection from George Washington's precedents to precedents set by Franklin Roosevelt. He establishes the first 100 days of office as a very significant time for change. These days, pay attention in a presidential election, and you're going to see a president roll out his 100-day plan. Well, this first comes from Roosevelt. And he felt that doing anything was going to be more than Hoover had done. Hoover was a do-nothing president, gets blamed for get the Hoovervilles, get his name slapped on it, all that kind of stuff. So Roosevelt is going to do something, and he rolls out this plan for his first 100 days. His reform package gets called the New Deal. It's a new deal for Americans. If the old is not working for us, then by gosh, I got the new. I just told you his campaign motto. What was it?
Happy days are here again.
Happy days are here again, right? Hope and change and stuff. So that's the old, and it's the Republicans, by the way. I'm the new. We're the Democrat Party, and happy days are here again. Call for a new deal. In his inaugural address, his first one, he said something very iconic, something that we, kind of memorize a lot today. He said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, right? There's nothing in the economy we don't have to worry about. Military issues we don't have to worry about. Now, I mean, there's plenty to worry about, but he's trying to give Americans the enemy of fear instead of the enemy of the economy or foreign invasion, whatever. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Kind of a unifying statement, and it set the tone for his president. He, his last name, does it stick out to you?
Theodore.
He's cousins
He
with
is,
Theodore.
that's right. He is cousins with Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore has a deal of his own. What was that deal called?
Square deal.
The square deal. And like a good Baptist preacher, it's his components all started with a C. Well, this Roosevelt's New Deal is going to all start with R. He's going to have three. Let me get here. Make a more active government. Things I've already said. He's going to have his New Deal is going to have three components. They all start with an R: relief, recovery, and reform. Something else new that he did was that he authored these Fireside Chats. So what piece of technology was new to the country, to the world at this time that you see in the picture? Yep, radio. So he capitalized on this new piece of technology by coming onto the radio personally, communicating to the country with his voice, and his tone and his speech and his language was very reassuring to the country. They got nicknamed Fireside Chats because just like you might have your favorite TV show, American Idol on Monday nights and Grey's Anatomy on Thursday nights, Americans waited around their radios for the president to come on and just chat with them in the evening. And he took on this tone like he was just conversing with you in your own living room. So he became a friend. He became a friend to Americans, and that contributes to their sense of trusting his plan, as well as their sense of just believing that he was for them. If the other guy was a do-nothing president, President Roosevelt, he's going to do something for us. He's going to help my family. So this is definitely going to contribute to his overall favorable ratings. And this is a little bit extra, kind of a half step ahead of ourselves, but do you know how many times he got elected to be president?
4 times.
4 times. He was elected president 4 times. Wow. That goes against what?
George Washington.
George Washington's precedent of stepping down after only 2 terms. Roosevelt, it's not a law, okay? These days it is. But back then it was not a law that you could only run twice. He runs and is elected 4 times. Obviously the people kept voting for him, okay? He wasn't becoming a king. He wasn't overtaking anything. The people kept voting for him. So he's elected 4 times. Largely because of his early success and things like the Fireside Chats here. So let's dive through the 3 R's and then we'll take our bathroom break. That'll be a good pause for us. New Deal, economic reform programs designed. So we're under designed to solve the problems of the Great Depression. Go ahead and fill in your notes. Sorry, I'm kind of one slide behind. This in on your notes? Okay, good. New Deal, economic reform programs. This is stuff I've already said. I'm just keeping myself on track. Designed to solve the problems of the Great Depression by having a lot of programs and spending a lot of money. Okay, Hoover was do nothing. Roosevelt's going to be do something, and his somethings, they're going to cost a lot of money. So that's going to become a criticism that maybe, just maybe, he's spending too much money. Now, Ms. Williams, while I got you here, I'm going to open the package here. They've got a lot of fair questions that I'm not quite sure I'm articulating very well. Where does money come from? Why can't we just print more of it? And, if when the stock market crashed, where did all that cash go, et cetera? I mean, I try to explain credit a little bit.
So when the 2 different pieces. So the piece about where does money come from, we have to have, it used to be that we had to have the equivalent of gold and silver in possession to be able to print money. Money's only worth the paper it's printed on. It's useless if we don't have the gold and silver to exchange to back it up with other countries. Because like what does Mexico use? What's their money called? The peso. Okay. Ours is the dollar. What's something that what's Japanese called?
I don't know.
The yen. Okay. So the what now? The one. See, I'm not even familiar with what their money is, but you know, like, do they all count the same?
I mean, they.
No, they're not worth the same. It is not a 1-to-1-to-1 trade. Okay, so this is getting into economics for next year. But what it is all valued on is the strength of your economy. So the stronger your economy and the stronger the growth of things going on in your nation and the spending of money, then the stronger your dollar or your yen or your peso or your won are. The weaker your economy, the more you start getting into trouble. Then compared to another nation who is just banging, going along, it weakens, okay? So used to, the dollar was one of the strongest ones because not just of the gold and silver we had going on, but it had to do with the economy. Think about it this way. Our economy is always in motion. Would you agree? So I don't ever use the illustration of our economy being a car that's sitting in park because that would imply that our economy comes to a stop. Instead, when I taught economics, I always use the illustration of a boat. Because a boat that it might be sitting on the water and not moving, the boat is still moving, right? And so when the economy starts to go too far, where are we at right now? Are we in a recession or are we in an expansion? What are we doing right now? Are we spending too much money or are we not spending enough money? What's going on? We're spending too much. Inflation is some of the highest that it's been. So the boat is starting to do this. So our government's job is to step in and start doing some taps. I call it a little mallet. Don't get out the sledgehammer, get the mallet and tap, tap, tap to try to get us back in where we need to be. If you get out a mallet and we're this way and you slam it, what's going to happen? We're just going to do this. So the goal is actually to keep us like a boat as an economy so that we're doing this. So back 10 years ago when I was still in the classroom.
Mr. Swanson, I need Haley hands for checkout, please.
On the way.
We just established, at that point, we had just hit the $1 trillion mark in debt. Now, do they have their phones? Do you have your phones?
They do.
Google it. What is the U.S. national debt?
It's like 7
I
billion.
don't wanna know.
U.S. national debt. Where are we?
It's like 7 billion.
I'm learning right alongside you. They ask some hard questions.
And that's good. And you know what? He's doing the exact thing he should do and the exact thing I still do. I don't know all the
$21
answers.
trillion.
But we can look, we're at what?
$21 trillion.
Correct. And so 10 years ago, it was like, we're approaching the trillion in debt. That means in debt, meaning we've spent more than we have in-house. So how are we spending it if we don't have it? Print it off. Print it off? Credit. If I offer you credit to go get you a burger down the street, let's see who's calling me. Oh, the boss is calling. I'm gonna have to pause. If I offer you credit to go get a burger down the street, then what am I gonna expect? I'm gonna expect you to pay me back, and I'm probably gonna charge you a little extra for the privilege of borrowing my money. I gotta go answer Miss Martin. So here's what I want you to do. Pull up your phone, look up to see who does the United States owe the most money to? Who does the United States owe the most money to? That trillions of dollars, folks. Other countries are buying us out. They're buying us out. Invite me back next week and we'll get on the stock market.
Thank you.
Something tells me it's China.
Something tells me
Japan.
it's China.
It's hold on, I still have a question on that.
Okay.
Japan.
Yeah,
Oh, that's not cute. Okay. Tell me how Mr. Roosevelt here is spending this money when we don't have it.
Yes. That
Yes,
is,
that's
there is
it.
a global, it is like playing with monopoly money on a global level.
Well, that's what all money is.
That is an ongoing criticism of government. How in the world is your budget gonna exceed what you literally have as a country? And you can make a real good you can make a real good local analogy here. We would never accept a family overspending their budget by 800%, right? That family would have the credit card companies coming after them. That family would have the bank coming after their home.
That's why other
So
countries
why
do
in the world does the country and Congress at that get to overspend, get to unbalance our budget? It is incredibly confusing. And I'll make a final thought statement here, get to Garrett. when I think about the complexities of national leadership, when I think about what would it really take to say run for Congress, guys, my headspace is not there on the economy. I don't know. I live in my little bubble that makes $38,000 a year. I'm grateful that my wife makes more than that. We pay our bills. We're raising our kids, going to church, and eventually we're going to expire. People just live in their space without wondering about the bigger stuff because it's so complicated. For those of you that can start to dissect the bigger picture or keep asking those questions, maybe, just maybe, we'll solve something someday.
Oh, yes.
I can leave it at, what I can leave it at is it's really confusing and I've got questions too. G? All right.
You got a lottery ticket.
Let's go to the bathroom and I'll talk to anyone who has questions.
Wait, I want to hear about the lottery ticket.
Oh my God. Okay, well, let's like move together.
Let's take the
Let's
long
go the
way,
long
long
way.
way.
Sure.
Finish your.
Yeah, you can go.
Come on.
Oh, James, Skip. Come on, brother.
You got a lottery ticket, say you buy a lottery ticket for $5, but you can win up to $1 million. They're just handing out free money. That's what I'm saying.
What stimulus checks are. They give money to people that don't have jobs.
That don't-
That are too lazy to work.
Go get jobs.
But they're
Yeah, they're giving away
too
and
fucking lazy.
And
Plenty
that's
of
We don't
jobs.
understand.
That's one of the
Stupid.
That's one of the
Doesn't
reasons.
make any sense.
Guess what? That's one of the reasons. Because no one.
What? What? We were talking about.
Yeah, what's your question?
All right, you got lottery tickets.
Yes.
You have a $5 lottery ticket.
That's what it basically is. That's what it is.
I'll be on my day, friends. Just believe that. Got a whole book. Oh! Tail hole started to tickle.
Yeah, because you started squeezing the. Get it off.
I will do it. Right. Don't try me. Ice. Kiss me.
You know?
No. So out. So out.
Hey, Jared, you still got that check?
Hey, ask your mom to get you. Ask your mom.
You still got that check, sweet.
Where? Where's
You
the
get that right there.
Right here. This is one of my coaches.
I'm keeping it too. Is it really bad luck to use them?
Yeah, it is.
It is, that's what they say, but I don't care because I still use them.
Nuh-uh.
Because I'm a savage.
If I break my brakes, it's not my damn problem.
Right.
I'm gonna tell your mom message you with all my coaches.
Who you gonna shot?
I just didn't hear that.
All right, come on in. That was a far more complicated conversation than I anticipated.
All right, we have
Did
some
you
more
answer
questions
Gary's
that we
question?
figured out
Okay. Jared
Giving
asked me
out
about the
free money.
lottery.
that we don't have.
It's gonna be me tomorrow. You wanna make a bet with
Hear me on this. Let's just start writing this in.
Miss or wounded?
I'm killing.
Okay.
The
first one.
All right, my class that
So,
way.
I kill it.
All right, let's make a bargain with each
I
other.
think that means we should.
Let me walk through this conversation, and that doesn't mean I'm silencing your questions, but we have taken a step off the path in a way that we're not gonna get through these
Yes, we gotta
classes.
hurry.
That's right.
Good, just
So,
start
the
reading.
first of the 3 R's, relief. Relief is immediate help. It is at most like, let's stop the bleeding now. Immediate help, and it's through money and a variety of support. I know support's kind of a very generic word there, money and support. Here are some examples, and I'm going to try to explain each of them. A bank holiday. Bank holiday means banks stop doing business. If the banks are having issues, arguably even corrupt, they're going to stop doing business until they're investigated by the government. Government's going to try to root out any bad practices. Why are there being runs on banks? Why are the banks running out of money? So a bank holiday was like that immediate, stop the bleeding, put pressure on the wound. We're going to investigate the banks. Federal Emergency Relief Administration, FERA, kind of the definition's kind of in the words right there. This is a pot of money that arguably doesn't exist. I hear you. Right? Sometimes we just make numbers up and say it's our future debt. A pot of money that is going to divvy out income to those who need it. Conversations about those who are, we've had conversations about those who are less fortunate, those who need, like, who really needs money? Do you have an inability to work? Do you have an inability to find a job? 25% unemployment? Why aren't people having jobs, etc.? FERA, they're just gonna, it's pretty fair comparison to the $600 stimulus checks that came out in the middle of COVID. It's going to stop the bleeding now. Here's money to get through this month. So this is the first level of the New Deal relief, immediate help from relief.
But it's not helping anything.
What's that?
It's not helping anything if they're still in debt.
So the argument will be, how is it helping if we are all, as a country, growing in our debt, right? We send out $300 million, $600 checks. Who's that helping when we all got to pay it back eventually? Realistically, your grandkids, not mine, your grandkids are going to be paying back the COVID stimulus checks 40 years from now. Incrementally through their taxes, but your grandkids are still going to be feeling that economic hit. Recovery. Recovery is the next level. Okay, relief, then recovery. Recovery is to get out of the depression. Let's do better. Okay. Hoover wasn't working for you. Roosevelt is. The recovery started a lot of temporary jobs and programs. There were several programs that do not exist today, but they got created at the time, and it was to make jobs. A lot of these programs were basically fill-in-the-blank type programs. Hey, let's go build nature parks. Let's go build some monuments. They basically created projects to make jobs and to be able to pay people. Several awesome national monuments have come out of this. the Arch in St. Louis. We talked about the Gateway Arch before because that's where Lewis and Clark left out of St. Louis. That is a project that came out of these recovery programs. They basically, that's kind of an extra creation in the world. Maybe we didn't need to build the St. Louis Arch, but in this time, it's through the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, which is not on your screen. In this time, the project, this was a project. It was a project that was made just to make jobs. A lot of nature trails, natural park type things also got built during this time. So WPA, Work Pays America. And a lot of times these are called the alphabet agencies, right? These because you can see that they're just acronyms. So WPA is Work Pays America, just a real broad, real generic program that put people back to work. TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. This is this is a program that lasted for a long time, and a lot of times people hike the TVA. TVA being a synonym for a long trail through Tennessee, and I think TVA even extends into Georgia. I think I'm not saying that wrong, but it's a very long trail, like a nature trail, and people had to cut through. I'll get to all of them. People had to cut through, trees and forests and actually make this trail. So kind of just extra employment. Did the world need the TVA trail to be cut? Maybe not. But Roosevelt created this program so that there would be jobs. TVA, what's the next one? AAA, that's the Agricultural Adjustment Act. So just ag, okay, it was an act that helped farmers. And then the HOLC, Homeowners Loan Corporation, bit of a regulation on banks as how they gave out money for homes. So I understand that you probably don't remember all of those alphabet soups. That's fine. I'm going to emphasize the one you really need to know on the next screen. So go ahead and just write the alphabet soups. HOLC, Homeowners Loan Corporation. Homeowners Loan Corporation. All right, relief, immediate help. Recovery, let's get out of the depression. Reform, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. This is the long-lasting change to laws. Not just stop the bleeding, but let's actually fix the whole body. Change the laws, permanent programs to avoid another depression. Not temporary jobs, not temporary programs, permanent programs. Biggest one being Social Security. I'm going to elaborate on Social Security. So I understand you wrote down all those acronyms. Thank you. That's good. It's on your notes. But Social Security is what we're really going to hang out on for just a second. What do you know about Social Security?
Everybody gets a number when they're born.
Okay, Social Security number, true. How does anyone in your family receive money from Social Security? Probably not yet. Your dad does? How old's your dad? Okay. You receive Social Security from, okay, fair, good. I forgot about that little qualifier right there, Bradley. Social Security is most associated with.
Do I receive Social Security?
I don't have that answer individually.
You need to know that.
Social Security. We can look into it. I will look into that for you. Social Security is most often associated with old age pensions. If you work to a certain age, and there are different brackets, I think like 57, 62, 65, different levels of your Social Security, but it's pensions for people who are ready to retire. A lot of times, retirement is associated with drawing your Social Security check. So I don't know everyone's individual situation, parents, grandparents, but usually in your older age, 62 or 65, is when people start to receive Social Security. Legacy from someone who has passed away being passed on to children. That's true. That's a little loophole that I wasn't considering. So Bradley, I know that affects you personally. You can't. Oh, okay.
Oh, that's probably why I don't know about it.
Okay.
He would be used to that.
Got it. Got it. So, and the reason for that is Bradley's dad paid into Social Security, and now the benefit is coming to his offspring, his family, his kids. Same thing. Social Security is not free. You pay into it your whole life. If you look at your paycheck, you in the future, if you look at your paycheck, there's a little line item that says what you have given to Social Security from that paycheck. If you're self-employed or if your parents are running their own business, they have to kick back a certain portion under taxes, but they kick back a certain amount to Social Security. So you pay into it for the whole lifetime, then you receive it. It's almost like right now I'm paying my grandparents' Social Security, and then in 30 years, my kids will kind of pay for my Social Security. A lot of times Social Security is in the news because what if it goes broke? What if we actually run out of money? Will people who need it not receive it? If you paid into it for a lifetime, are you going to not receive it when it's your turn to get the benefit? These are the potential flaws with Social Security. Go ahead.
But isn't it kind of just like a holding thing for your mother? Just kind of like a.
It's basically forced savings in a way. Yeah, indicates as in a holding thing for your money. In a way, it's a forced saving for retirement. Because people who don't have the discipline or don't see the importance of saving now, Social Security is basically forcing you to save. Now, people, here's a little bit of life advice for you. And I know our advisory classes has been about personal finance the past couple weeks. People who are going to have a comfortable retirement don't rely on Social Security alone. Social Security is kind of like bare minimum subsistence. You can probably buy groceries with Social Security and make your house payment if you're still making a house payment, obviously a moderate house. But if you want to have a comfortable retirement, I know that word might be different for everybody. Comfortable retirement takes Social Security at the as the smallest payment, but also if you've saved for a lifetime, you start to draw from your own savings. You're not working anymore. You're living off of your savings. Social Security, personal savings. So a lot of people be like, when I'm 62, I'll start drawing Social Security and I'll be fine. Social Security is a pretty small payment in the grand scheme of things. If you want to have a more comfortable living, if you want to travel in your older years, you need to save now. And you can't replace your young years of saving. Now you guys, not quite yet, but I would encourage you, by the time you're 21, start saving for retirement. Sounds radical, right? That's 40 years away. By the time you're 21, start saving. Yeah, Garrett knows that I'm just preaching Dave Ramseyisms right there. All right, Social Security, old age pensions. There's also a little bit in there, unemployment insurance, medical insurance. Unfortunately, a lot of at this time, not today, at this time, women and African Americans are excluded from Social Security. So we're still existing inside of a segregated and genderized country. Even though as we make progress, there is still some unfortunate biases, prejudices, racisms, where women and African Americans are not included in Social Security. Here's a bit of a cartoon kind of to describe. That's Franklin in the middle, FDR. And it's like all of his programs, all of those lettered agencies are the kids dancing around him as if to say that they're his offspring. He has created them. He has created these programs just like, obviously, a person creates children. So just kind of descriptive of how many programs he created at that time. Well, I'm going to save that one for your mom and dad. And that's 2 questions for you today. So, Eleanor Roosevelt. Let's talk about the Queen. Let's talk about the Queen. God, I can't stand any of you right now. I always have better fourth blocks. Fourth block doesn't ask a lot of questions.
Exactly, they're boring people.
Okay, so briefly, this is a bit of a side pull out on Franklin. We're going to talk about his wife. You want to know what? Say it again, Rashid. That's his cousin. That's his fifth cousin.
Yeah, it is.
Eleanor is his fifth cousin. That is far enough away that it's not illegal, but certainly some people would question the genetics side of that. They did not have kids. Now, here's Eleanor. Eleanor is known. Eleanor expanded the role of First Lady. What are we saying about her? What are we saying about her?
Can you imagine being like, hey, Mom, I got this new girlfriend, but you know her already. Oh, really? Did she go to school? No, she's my cousin. It's like, hey, you want to go to a family reunion?
Oh, we're already there. We're already there. Yeah. I can't necessarily explain.
Y'all already going like every family event.
Not the choice I would have made. All right, Eleanor Roosevelt. She expands the role of First Lady, right? Previously, hear me on this. Let me finish. Previously, the First Lady had been arm candy. The First Lady had been just present. Okay, the First Lady had been someone who had provided a feminine touch to the White House. Eleanor Roosevelt was not going to sit back and just be arm candy. Eleanor Roosevelt was very active. She was active in a variety of causes, women's rights and also minority rights. I love this picture right here because it shows her caring for a young black girl. I think it's really significant. This is so small, but let me tell you this. When you get down on the level of a child and you talk to them in their eyes, instead of being someone that lords over them, I don't always do it. I'm not perfect, but when you get on the level of a child, you make it real personal. So I love that history right there because she's not behaving like the queen. Okay, she's not behaving like she's in a position of power, especially as a white woman to an African American young girl. She's really bringing a sense of equality to that conversation. So she was very much known for advocacy for minority rights, women's rights, and she connected to the United Nations later in life. Later in life. We talked about the United Nations. It doesn't come about right away. She connected to the United Nations later in life. What?
I have a theory. Eleanor Roosevelt she looks a lot like Queen Elizabeth, and that woman is old as dirt.
All right,
What
moving on
if
to
it's actually Eleanor?
The Dust Bowl, which is what I'm gonna feed you for lunch, a bowl of dust. If you don't let me be on track here. The Dust Bowl.
You really gonna leave me?
Dust Bowl. Totally different topic here. Now this fits into the Great Depression because it's just like bad times getting worse. Okay, hard times getting harder. Dust Bowl is a product of our own making. Farmers literally over-farmed, failed to rotate their crops, and sucked the life out of the soil in the middle of the country. When we talk Dust Bowl, you see a map there on your paper. I'm gonna have you actually sketch on that map here in just a second. You can use colors if you got them, or you can use your pencil. It's not a big deal. But farmers failed to do good farming. This is actually something that we should have understood from as far back as the time of feudalism. My world historians, we talked about feudalism. A major piece of feudalism, that's right, we made an 8-foot-long map, was rotating the crops, resting the soil. If you have 4 quadrants of your farm, you're farming on numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then you rotate. You rest number 1, you farm on 2, 3, and 4, and you rotate. You rest number 2, you farm on 3, 4, and 1. Does that make sense? You rest your land. Farmers were so, I don't want to say greedy or maybe even slightly uneducated, but they just farmed the moisture out of their soil to the point that topsoil, like 3 feet deep, was just dust, powder fine dust. They had sucked the nutrients and the moisture out of their soil. Christy, you have a thought?
Like, you don't even have to do crop rotation because there are types of plants that they like make off the nutrients.
That's true. Or rotating the crops. Yeah. So they just did the same crop in the same patch of dirt over and over and over and over. They didn't rest the soil, or they didn't re-energize the soil in that regard. I got a friend who's from church who's into agriculture. It's his job. And he said, hey, man, next time you teach Dust Bowl, I can help you understand what you're talking about. So I probably should have talked to Ben before this class. Anyway, the result of this is huge dust storms crop up around the country. And guys, when I say huge dust storm, I don't mean like a little bit of dust blowing around the golf course. I mean dust storms that could be seen from Kansas all the way to New York City. Literally a cloud of dust that would travel across the whole country. And in fact, yeah, it would cause blackouts. Look at those farmhouses. Those farmhouses like that would be in darkness for days. Darkness for days. So you can see the label there. Dust storm approaching Texas. This is kind of a perspective on the ground right there. What do you think this led to? Blake, what you got?
Sort of like, it's like curious, but what do you think like from space?
Well, yeah, great question. I was actually going to say, if we had satellite imagery, we would be able to see it from space. At the time, no satellite imagery, but if you had satellite imagery, I think it would look like a cloud rolling across the country. Total side fact, since you brought it up, there is satellite imagery of September 11th, and in New York City, you can see plumes of smoke. So I would say it probably looked pretty similar to that. Great question. Great question. Hey, what do you think are some side impacts of this dust being present in the country?
Allergies.
Lung issues.
Extreme
Exactly right.
allergies.
Upper respiratory issues. So you guys think if so, like we were so restrictive with wearing masks in the time of COVID, people wore masks in the 20s for this reason.
Well,
20s.
Yeah, they did it for the plague too.
This is the 30s.
30s, yeah, the 30s. People wore masks in the 30s
Is that one on the
because of
left
the dust
homemade?
bowl. Huh?
Is that one on the left homemade? Like, this kind of like
The
a
left
flower
homemade.
pot?
I don't have the
This
history
looks like
of
a
these
flower
masks.
Exactly.
Yes. You can have them all.
Okay, tango for chicken,
All of
please.
them. You can have all of them. Everybody's coming to the office, Vicki.
She hung up.
All right, so here's what I want you to do on this map. If you have colors, you can use your colors. If you don't have colors, you probably just use your pencil. I want you to sketch that orange part as a dark spot, and then the yellow part as a little bit lighter. I'll pull these out. And I want you to just kind of sketch on that map for a second here so you can see where the heart of the Dust Bowl is, and then the other areas still affected by the wind blown. So make that hard orange circle. That's the heart of the Dust Bowl. Make it a little bit wider yellow. And then, if you have time in the next couple minutes, you can start to draw these routes as well. Because I'm going to talk about westward migration. So basically, sketch this map on your map while I be quiet for a few seconds.
You're going to our map?
I'm still here, man.
Yeah, they're going.
Everyone should go to our map. Should all go.
Yep, everyone.
Someone cut my straw.
You broke it.
You literally broke it.
You literally dropped it.
You always drop stuff. You're in the
I
way.
did do that. I did do that.
Mom's not allowed to make this.
Wow, that's a serious drop.
Huh?
Serious.
Hard no. Please.
That's rude. After what you said to them, you could
0%
give them a
chance.
crayon.
That
was really mean.
That was rude.
What did I say?
You must have, the class is much better when you guys aren't here. Are you trying to tell them to not come to school?
No, I'm trying to say I'm about to change seats in this room.
At least
If they
they're
don't
interested.
figure
You
it out.
act like that's gonna change anything. I can conversate with anybody in here. and They
We was
can
literally
too.
talking
But it's a
about
crime of
president, you told us to be
convenience.
quiet.
It's a crime of
Yeah,
convenience.
they actually
Crime of
were.
convenience. You
Yes.
act like I know what that means.
We were too.
Sometimes you will chat
They
it
were
up
interested.
because of who's next to
Well,
you.
we were talking about Joe Biden, though.
And I wasn't, so that wasn't.
But you
I
were
was
talking about diseases.
Losing
Dude,
money.
that's so relevant.
We're talking about
Literally
losing
is.
money.
While you're
You hear us?
coloring, I will have this
You
side
You
conversation.
hear us.
I go home at night
Waffles are
hoarse from talking over you guys. And it is hard to discern, are you on topic or not? So sometimes I need you to just be quiet so that I can talk, so that I can get.
But it's better than us talking about drugs.
And I'm not a classmate.
Way better.
You're not like the.
Color your map!
Well, I was trying, but you're standing dry.
Hi, Garrett.
Seal.
On that's really.
All right, everybody to the office. Let's go.
I gotta talk to me.
Yeah, can we really? I'm gonna go home.
I'm going to the office, and if I get in trouble, it's
I gotta talk to Mika. See what you done did.
Why are we even still here?
I don't know.
Why are we
If
still
we all
fighting?
live, we
Why are
should
you
go home.
still?
No, I keep talking to myself.
You honestly probably would.
Have to deliver the class, no matter who's here.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Hey, you're
You would make a video and
Alright.
send it out.
One more minute on the coloring.
Yeah, I
Because
never
it's not
get
rocket
your
surgery.
I got
Rocket.
Why? You sent out one thing 3 times
I know.
last night. You send out so many emails.
I send out one a day.
You sent out 3 last night. It came through 3 times.
I did miss fire on one. It's like a half night.
Gosh, I was like, what? I know, gosh.
I'm just glad y'all get it. Just glad y'all get them.
It says the world.
I turned off my notes.
That's right.
Classes extravagant learning history.
Pull 3.
I'm trying to get to a review game.
No, is it actually a game or is it like that one time?
Y'all don't like roulette? Y'all don't like roulette?
Absolutely. Are we drawing the arrows?
How would you make that competitive? What would you do?
How would you make it
Make it
competitive?
fun. That's what I would do.
When you were like doing the 3.
Oh, it's so ill prepared for college.
Actually,
Make it fun, like y'all need entertainment.
But this is
see, like,
you're supposed to be.
This is not college. That's the whole point.
Karaoke, I was able to jump up and say no, make that fun. See?
Karaoke.
I was thinking that.
You act like I don't go home and rack my brain about how to help you have a funner day the next day.
I need to
Do
go back.
you?
Go back,
Or do you
please.
just-
No, Westward Migration is a consequence of the Dust Bowl. So since Harrison needs me to go back, take a mental image.
Harrison.
The arrows here are the lines of Westward Migration. Consequence of the Dust Bowl is when Americans began to move west in order to escape drought conditions. If you're living in
You're living in the
Oklahoma,
west and it's dusty,
right,
why
so
are you going west?
so that orange and yellow area, which is Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, like I distinctly remember plenty of stories growing up in Oklahoma about Dust Bowl, Dust Bowl heritage and how it affected the state back then, not presently, but back then. A lot of people moved from Oklahoma out west, and not exclusively to California, but very often to California. So Westward Migration is largely associated with people moving from Oklahoma to California. And a lot of times a derogatory nickname for these movers is, anybody?
Roosevelt.
Okies.
The move.
Okies.
The
A
movers.
play on the word Oklahoma, Okies.
Yeah.
So if you were like this picture here,
You're an Okie.
Yeah, you are.
You're an Okie because you.
that's
moved from
right. Well,
Oklahoma.
so these days, Oklahomans, and I find this very confusing.
You're a boomer soon.
As someone who understands history, the name Okie or the nickname Okie is not a positive term. But a lot of Oklahomans will say, oh yeah, we're Okies from Oklahoma. That's not a good thing. To be an Okie from Oklahoma is not a good thing. So Okie is a derogatory term. Now picture here, this is not a real family moving. This is from the movie Grapes of Wrath, which comes from the book Grapes of Wrath. You guys, ELA, heard of Grapes of Wrath? Very fat, very long book, okay, hard to read, it's hard language. But it is about a migrant family that moves from the middle of the country, the Dust Bowl area, to California. And the picture is actually from the movie, The Grapes of Wrath, and it shows the family having all their belongings packed into their car. And think about how much fuel it would take to get to California. What if your car breaks down? You need water, you need food.
Well, right now, we have prices.
These days, there's so many convenience stores on the side of the road that, a road trip's not that big of a deal. But back then, there were not convenience stores every highway exit. So it would be a whole lot harder to, have a long trip like that. This is from a movie. However, this is a real picture. These are real pictures of people moving out west.
And they put a whole house on a trailer and
That's right. It's almost like they made a,
It's literally
the
a
back
house with a trailer.
camper. Yeah, camper is a great word.
A mobile
That's how
home.
Here is a
It's a
colorized
mobile
photo of a family moving out west. You can see,
they don't look.
probably gave themselves their own haircuts,
Why is it hard?
right? It's just kind of abject poverty.
Is that
right
you?
there.
They're cute.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
the-
I
That's
think
you
when I look
out
in the when I look in the eyes of that dad, no,
He's got a
that's
big
not
forehead.
me. Like he is just trying to care for his family, right?
That's a good looking.
Wants a job, wants to just have a good old American dream kind of a life, but the lack of farming in the Dust Bowl region made it too difficult. Here's a very famous photograph, and this is known as the migrant mother. The migrant mother. It is on Mr. Rondo's wall. It has been taken by a photographer, a very famous photographer named Dorothea Lange, and I think that's on her poster as well. Because one of the New Deal programs was photography. One of the job-creating programs by Roosevelt, he sent photographers out across the country as part of a program to just capture the history of America at that time. Dorothea Lange is one of these photographers, and she snaps this picture, which becomes a very, very famous photograph. How old do you think this lady is?
27.
Really?
43.
You guys are
14.
sarcastic.
Yeah, you're right. I give her 63.
No, I think.
I'm not gonna lie, every time you ask a question like that, you're always way younger than what I think.
She looks definitely in her 40s, right? She looks in her 40s. She is 30 years old. 30 years old. So the punchline there is that she looks a lot older than she is. Her children, what are her children doing right here?
Crying.
Yeah, they don't even want their faces to be shown in the picture. Now this is the most famous photograph that comes from this moment, but there are a couple others taken at the same time. And you can see in this one, her child does show the face. So, the migrant mother, the migrant woman, very famous photograph that kind of depicts overall the hard times of the Depression. All right, let's round it out here. So the second New Deal. I am not going to go deep into it. Just suffice it to say there's more programs. FDR was always trying to do a new thing. He was not going to be a do-nothing president like Hoover.
What is that?
So over the course of his presidency, he was president for 12 and a half years. He was always trying something new. But he is criticized. He is criticized very often for having big government, raising taxes, right? If you raise taxes, who's in charge of your money?
Yourself.
The government, right? People, a lot of times people want to be in charge of their own paycheck, but people also want programs. So that's the trade-off, right? If you're going to have programs, you got to pay taxes. So FDR is very often criticized for raising taxes and having a big government. However, the goal was always to try to get people to work and end the Depression. I think that he had a good motive. He had an honest and true motive. Whether you agree or not with his economic policy, he was trying to help people get through the Depression. Criticisms, kind of like I just said, big government and deficit spending. That means spending money you don't have. The picture here is like of a Trojan horse. It's almost like saying that the government is trying to sneak a tax hike past the Constitution. New Deal tyranny is trying to sneak past the Constitution of the United States. So they're definitely critics of the New Deal. It wasn't happy days are here again for everybody, but even though that's what his campaign motto was. So anyway, criticisms are big government and deficit spending. And then a specific critic, this is a name that we got to get to, a name that's inside of our standards, Huey P Long. He was a critic of the New Deal. Believe it or not, he felt like FDR wasn't doing enough. Some people felt like he was taxing too much. Huey P Long felt like he wasn't taxing enough. Huey P Long, on the other hand, he was a favor of a program called Share Your Wealth. Very socialist. He wanted everybody to have the same fair standard of living. He's the governor of Louisiana, and that's where he kind of comes from, his base of political power. But he ran for president. When he ran for president, you know what happened to him? He got assassinated. Yeah, as a candidate for president, not the president, but as a candidate for president, he was assassinated. So there's kind of some intrigue there. Is it a conspiracy? Was it not? Was he silenced by Roosevelt? Some people think that the assassin was from Roosevelt silencing Huey P Long. Who knows? I'm not going to get into that today. Just suffice it to say, Huey P Long was a critic of Roosevelt. And rounding it out, legacy of the New Deal is that the government takes on a larger role in people's lives. Many programs are still in existence to this day, such as the Social Security Act for sure. And however, even amidst all this effort, amidst all this trying to recover from depression, you know what it's gonna take to fix the depression in the country? A war. A war.
Oh my God.
So it just goes to show you that in a time of war, the military machinery and the factories and the jobs that come from that, be it in the military or in industry, a war is good for a country. And Anna Kate said a really good thing there.
It can be.
It's good for an economy. So I'll qualify that statement. A war is good for an economy. And a lot of people wonder if FDR actually wanted us to get involved in World War II for so that rounds out the Depression and the New Deal. I know that you guys had some very good questions about complicated, things related to the stock market.
Yeah, I thought we were going there.
Post that in there.
Yeah, I'm glad we did.
Make sure you